Hi all. In the previous video, we wrote a validation using triggers that if the account rating is hot, then just fire an error message. So this is how the validation rule or the validation looks like, that if the account rating is hot, just go ahead and throw an error message. And the problem with this code is that, let's say, even before writing this trigger, I might have some account with rating as hot, right? Even before writing this code, there is a possibility that I might have records with rating as hot. Now, if I'm going to go to this existing records with rating as hot and I'm going to make changes to it, right now I'm changing the phone number. As you can see, I'm changing the phone number. Okay, so it should basically allow me, right? I'm just changing the phone number. And if I click on save, it's going to throw an error message because the rating is hot. Now, if you think about the existing record, even before writing the trigger, there might be existing record where I just want to update the phone number. And even if I'm trying to update the phone number, it's not allowing me to, right? I cannot change the rating. I have to keep the rating as it is, but I just want to update the phone number. So right now, this code is not working perfectly fine. The reason is because it's just checking whether the rating is hot. If the rating is hot, it's just throwing an error message. Instead, what we want is that if the rating is changed to hot, right? If the rating previously was warm and now it's changed to hot, in that cases only, it should fire an error message. If the rating previously was also hot and now also is hot, I should not get an error message. So in simple terms, what I need to do is that first of all, let's say if the previous value was warm and newer value is hot, only then go ahead and fire an error message. This means the value is changed. I changed the priority field and the priority field is changed to hot. On the other hand, if the rating previously was also hot and new value is also hot, this means I did not change the priority or the rating field at all, right? I did not change the rating field at all. If previously also was hot and new also is hot, this means I never changed the rating field. So simply, in that cases, I don't need to fire that error message. I should fire that error message only if the previous value and the newer value are not similar to each other. So now, I have already taught that using trigger.new, you can get the newer value. So this hot, the newer value. So for an example, previously was warm. Now we have changed it to hot. To get the newer value, you can use trigger.new. But to get the older value, the previous value, right? You can get trigger. You can use trigger.old. So to get the newer value, you can use trigger.new, but to get the older value, you can use trigger.old. Now, again, the problem with this trigger.old is, let's consider I have 5 records that I'm trying to insert, right? Or 5 records I'm trying to update. If I'm updating the 5 records, let's say I'm updating the record with 5 records from their name, like for an example, ABC to XYZ, I was changing. Okay, so these are trigger.new. I'm updating the newer record that I have, right? So let's say the previously the value was ABC of this contact or the account. I'm changing to XYZ. The trigger.new, the newly changed value, these are this R1, R2, R3, R4, R5. The newly updated records are R1, R2, R3, R4, R5. So trigger.new is going to return me all the newer versions of the record. On the other hand, trigger old is going to return R10. O is denoting as older version of the record. R10, R20, R30, R40, and R50. Right? Now, while you're inserting, what you need to check that if the older value, in our case, right, we have to change the rating. Instead of this, let's say the newer rating was hot. Okay, I need to check the record R1 record that I'm trying to insert. What is the value of the older versions of the record? Okay, now diagrammatically we know that R10 is the older version of the record. See, simply what I need to check is that what is the older version of R1 record while I am trying to update. What is the older version of this R1 record? To do that, we use trigger.old, right? But you cannot like in code you have to specify which is the older versions of the record. Now if you're trying to insert R1, this R1, it will never be able to find out which is the older version, R2 or R3 or R4 or R5. Which is the older version, it does not know by default. Okay, trigger.old, even if you're passing trigger.old, it will not by default know which is the older versions of the record. So basically R1, if R1 is the newer version of the record, which is the older version, it will not know directly. Okay, this is code. It does not independently decides what needs to be done. You have to specify things. So R1 does not know which is the older versions of the record. Now if you think, right, for an example, if let's consider R10 is the older version of the record. Okay, so the rating previously was warm. Now if you see, the newer version had the value rating as hot, and the older version had the value as warm. The values change, but one thing is always common, that is the record ID, right? If you see, even if I'm going to update a record, if I'm going to update a account from, let's say, a rating from warm to hot, the ID of that record will never change. The values can change, the values within that particular account can change, but one thing will always remain constant is that the 18-digit ID of that account or record, whichever record you are trying to insert. So this is where Trigger.oldMaps comes into the picture. Trigger.oldMap is going to get you the ID and the complete older versions of the record. So let's consider this scenario. If the warm, right? If the previous value was warm, if I'm going to get this particular value using Trigger.oldMap, it's going to return me few things. It's going to return me the ID of the older versions of the record, that is 001, let's say, and the older value that is warm right now, or specifically we can say old account, right? And if I say diagrammatically, the ID as we can see is same. Okay, and the older version, if I use trigger.oldMap instead of trigger.old, if I use trigger.oldMap, it's going to return the value in the same manner. First is the ID, and second one is nothing but the whole account itself. I am writing right now warm, but it's going to return me the whole account old. Okay, so this is the way. So now if I want to get this older versions of the account, if I want to capture this older version of the account, I can use this key, right? Trigger.oldMap is going to return the value in the form of key and value pair. So I can use this key to get the value, and I can get the same key is also applicable in the trigger.new as well. So this key and this key is same. So basically what I can do is trigger.new ID, I can pass it inside the trigger.oldMap, and I can get the older version of the account. So let's start out diagram it or the coding way. Okay, so what I can do is I can create an account acc old, let's say, and trigger dot old map, okay, which is going to return me the older versions of the record, right? It's going to return me the older version r1, r2, r3, r4, out of which I just want the older versions of the currently inserted record. So for that purpose, what I'm going to do is this id, the newer versions id, that is acc dot id, I'm going to pass it inside the older version. So if you think about it, what I'm trying to do is the newer version record that I'm trying to insert, I'm passing this ID to the map of the older version of the record, right? As soon as I pass it, I will be able to get the older version of the account itself. So here I'm getting the older versions of the account itself. Now, as I have got the older version of the account, I can just take acc old dot rating is not equal to acc dot rating and acc rating equals to what. So it's going to check whether the older value of the rating and the newer value of the rating is equal to each other. If it's not equal to each other, and then if the rating is hot, this means the account rating was changed, right? So now if I try to run this code, let's check whether the trigger is active. Okay, it got deactivated. Okay, let's activate it. Now, if I go ahead and try to make changes to any other field except rating, it's gonna work perfectly fine because I did not change the rating itself. But now let's say the rating was warm, and now if I change the rating from warm to hot, then it's going to go ahead and fire an error message. So that's what we did. We checked whether the older value, which was warm right now, and the newer values, which is hot, if they are equal to each other. Okay, they are not equal to each other because the previous value was warm, newer value is hot. And if the current value is hot or not, yes it is, right? And as soon as it happens, just go ahead and throw an error message. So this is one of the most practical use of trigger.oldMap. If you found this video helpful, I request you to please like this video and subscribe to my channel.